So I have two claims I want to settle. So I'm originally from New Orleans, right? And I seen black on black crime my whole
Absolutely.
life, right?
Yes.
It's I don't believe it have nothing to deal with the police. It's more with the community because there's a lot of pride that's in that city, where to the point where this person can't tell me nothing. The way how your belief is might be right, right? But in New Orleans, it's a little different. Also, my second claim is this: we proclaim so much about Black Lives Matter, but when it comes down to a white person killing a black person, it's a big deal. It just don't make no sense to me.
Do you know what the statement Black Lives Matter is actually stating?
Yeah, well, like, you know.
So Black Lives Matter is really simply just stating that when black people are murdered by the police, that our lives should matter. And well, first of all, it was I think it's the senator of Louisiana who literally made a campaign ad, Kennedy it was, that said, do you want Louisiana to be run by crackheads? Like he said that, like straight up. Here's my question about New Orleans.
He said something about, he said, so you hate our police, the next time you're in danger, call a crackhead.
Look, if you hate cops just because they're cops, the next time you get in trouble, call a crackhead.
It's a damn shame, but that was a funny ad, I won't lie.
Would you say that New Orleans gets, that particular areas of New Orleans, for instance, like the Ninth Ward?
Yeah, the Ninth Ward is crazy, but I'm just saying they crazy.
Would you say that funding and attention is dispersed equally across New Orleans in terms of resources? Because I know that from living through Katrina, that is absolutely not the case.
Yeah, I agree with you in that case.
And to the talking about Hurricane Katrina, the majority of the destruction was caused because the government, right? They bombed the buoys that would have diverted the floods to more affluent communities, into majority black communities in the inner city. So the reason why there was so much destruction in Katrina was because they literally bombed the infrastructure that was designed to ensure that the majority of the city, in particular the black communities, did not get flooded or were not destroyed in the event of a flood. But they did. Simply to preserve the housing of the ultra wealthy and elite who will be able to pay and repair or even relocate just like that. Meanwhile, the average black American citizen who was living in Louisiana at the time, they lost everything. It was literally just a result of white greed that caused the majority of the destruction. Nothing else.
Here's the thing I want to just impart is that I think that we have a very distorted version of what resiliency and what restorative practice is, because I think that we forget that as humans, our ability to recalibrate, to heal from trauma. And so we cannot just casually think that people just get over things. Katrina, people in New Orleans are still reeling from Katrina.
Yeah, they are. That's true. That's true. That is true.
So when we talk about the amount of crime and violence that is still living and happening explicitly in Katrina, we have to also talk about the amount of trauma, the amount of drug use, the amount of policing.
Yeah, I agree. I personally agree. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
No problem.
Shout out to Josh. He's just like yellow shirt shorty. He actually listened. He actually took in information. He didn't just argue on emotional appeals. And the thing about Katrina, again, there are still people recovering. Mind you, it's been 20 years. It's been a fifth of a century, and people are still recovering. That's not a personal affair. That's a broader systemic issue.
My next claim is systemic racism isn't a theory. It's our lived reality backed by data and history.
It is. It's just facts. See, you're going to see the psychosis right here. I don't know why yellow shirt Charlie got up. We were rooting for you, but never mind. You're going to see the psychosis right here. They're going to literally try to refute facts. Look at the mustache. You can tell he's up to no good.
Hi, parents.
I want to listen to you first. Why do you feel that? Why do you feel that way? Why do
John
you?
came to,
you can tell
John
he's
went
up
to
to no
debate
good.
training before
He has a mustache straight out of a fair or a carnival from the 1920s, like a ringmaster or some shit. He is not living in the modern era, so therefore he cannot perceive modern issues. Not with critical thought, not with agency or synthesis. And I might be wrong. Maybe he might actually be more rational than I'm led on to believe by his appearance, because they say to walk not by sight but by faith, not by appearance but by righteous judgment. And maybe I'm not judging by righteous judgment. However, I get a vibe. And when I get a vibe, I know that it's true. And maybe I'm a hypocrite. I'm not divorcing myself from my lived experience. My intuition never lies.
Ultimately, I feel that way because it's simply just facts. It's in the books, and that's why there have been laws to challenge it.
Can you give me an example of one of those systems that you believe perpetuates that cycle of racism? Redlining? Okay.
Yes.
And how does that, can you elaborate? How is that affecting the Black community?
Do you know what redlining is?
I know a little bit.
Redlining was a system that was created to determine property values, and that said Black people can only live in certain neighborhoods and not in other neighborhoods. And the redlining lowered the property values of those Black neighborhoods by stating that they were more savage, that they were more dangerous, etc. Thus, they were not able to own property that was on a level of par to their white counterparts. There were also many efforts at just simply not allowing Black people property.
See, that's the incredulous. Is it incredulousness or incredulity? Hold up. I can admit when I don't know something. Incredulity. I was right. She presents the facts, and he face palms. Why are you face palming in the face of truth? It's just what it is. You have to embrace the truth. You have to integrate the truth, no matter how much it may hurt, no matter how much discomfort it may cause. So that way you can understand it and then make corrections from there. But you don't make corrections by trying to ignore an objective reality. You have to embrace it and then go from there. You have to address the cause before you can change the effect. You cannot change the effect by ignoring the cause. I'm sick of these people.
Feels like in the United States that for a while we've kind of established these systems at their foundation, and they've continued on, and they've continually just oppressed Black people, and we haven't dismantled them, and we haven't done much to them. So,
well, in many of these systems, they have been dismantled maybe in name, but because this country has never dismantled the culture of racism, they end up still living in practice. So we see that, for instance, in...
Again, he's trying to learn, and they throw up the red flags. He's not trying to affirm his beliefs. He actually wants to do better. He actually wants to understand where the opposing side is coming from, and then how to work from there. Now, I'm not saying all voices need to be heard, because Lord knows all voices do not need to be heard. But she does. And more to that. I forgot what I was going to say.
The way that the appraisal system works. Now, we saw there was an entire documentary on how appraisals have been also very racist, home appraisals, right? So your ability to sell your house for the value that it deserves.
Right.
There were a number of homes, particularly in Marin County, California, where Black people had one appraisal when they had their Blackness up, so they had their dashikis hanging, But then when they removed all of those items and put up white people and a dog in the house, and then had their white friends come and pose as the owners of the home, the appraisal was significantly higher.
But the problem I guess I have with systemic racism is, I guess for somebody like me, where my family comes from, the Deep South, that's where my grandparents are from. And my grandpa came, if you saw the house that he grew up in, I'm not trying to be funny, it looked like a slave house. It was just, they grew up in poverty. And the fact that he was able to go from that and get the highest rank enlisted in the United States Navy systems.
Mind you, the U.S. Navy is an inherently imperialistic endeavor that is literally designed to exploit the global South, majority Africa.
He was able to, pass on these things to his son, my dad, and his grandchildren. Now I'm able to get an education. I was able to get my undergrad, my master's, that, the great-great-grandson of enslaved peoples can now say that, educated and can even run for Congress. I don't see how these systems are still in place as they were before, because so in all reality, the problem is not the systemic racism, the problem is us. The problem starts with those people who are perpetuating these, racist ideals. And so I feel like just to attack these systems is just, it's nonsensical.
Who's running the systems?
Like which system?
Whether it's the prison
government.
Oh, Lord.
So if we're going to go based on systemic racism, it has to be institutionalized, which means it has to be written into law, made public.
We also can acknowledge that systemic examples come from not always it being written into law. And most of the people making the laws are not going to put their racism on the books.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So people will be like, prove to me that this law is racist, right? When was the Civil Rights Act passed? 1960, was it 64? I can't remember. I gotta buff up on my history. I think post 1964, you will not find a single law in American history that is explicitly racist. You will, however, find loopholes. You will find crafty wording. You will find things that are enshrined in law that are targeted towards Black people and towards other marginalized communities without saying so explicitly, but especially towards Black people, because it's illegal to actively discriminate against us. That does not mean that legislation does not get passed. That does not mean that over-policing does not exist. It does not mean that there are not concerted efforts within the ethos to ensure that Black people do not have the ability to advance systematically and establish their own autonomy and hegemony within the broader American community. And so because of that, people need to understand that plausible deniability doesn't actually exist when you can think critically. When you have a brain, plausible deniability doesn't exist. So they can say, well, this law isn't actually racist because it doesn't say anything. Well, yeah, because legally it can't. And yeah, yes, they do violate the laws all the time, but there's also the social backlash and repercussions. And we might be getting to a point where you might start to actually see rules and legislation that is targeted towards Black people very soon because of the direction that we're going in. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, but the fact of the matter is that it doesn't exist right now. So you'll never find anything that says, yeah, this is targeted against Black people, but that doesn't mean that there are not laws targeted against Black people. Plausible deniability only exists to veil the truth. So the fact that they're trying so hard to hide it is a testament to their nefarious acts and to the overall depravity that is deeply rooted in this country and expresses itself in the form of racism and white supremacy, or white dominance, I should say.
Civil Rights Acts of 1964. Then you also want to talk about the one in 1968. They did actually give more fair housing equality.
That was the goal.
Yeah, that's true.
But you see, that's the thing. It's like if so that's the difficult part of not changing a culture. You can change the law all day, but as Martin Luther King Jr., as the Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. talks about in his final book, he says, I feel like I integrated my people into a burning house because he understood America to be a place of morality.
Well, when it came back to even back in the 1960s, like Lyndon B. Johnson actually proposed many systems in place
where he actually won. People still got lynched.
Well, I can't really like say that's a systemic problem. That's definitely a personal heart problem. Those are more people's.
Lynching isn't a systemic problem. Okay.
Because when you don't allow for there to be repercussions for harmful behaviors of a people, you're literally saying our system is okay with this. So that's what Black Lives Matter is about, right? Saying like, okay, if police are gonna act in this way, well, there should at least be fair repercussions across all people that they're doing this to, and they're not carrying out those.
I don't know why they got their red flags up. They got cooked. But whenever people are like, oh, it's not a systemic issue, it's like they look at the history, or they don't. And they say that, okay, since the Civil Rights Act was passed, or since slavery ended and the Civil Rights Act was passed, suddenly racism ended. There was a second of time in between when the Civil Rights Act was passed and when it wasn't. There is a second of time between when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and when it wasn't. The signing of legislation does not negate the broader cultural sentiments at all. Especially like you said, if you don't punish that. All this is happening because we didn't punish the Confederacy, because we wanted to continue and maintain the system of white supremacy, especially on a global scale. It doesn't matter what's signed into law if the broader social and cultural ethos adheres to a contrarian ideology to whatever law that is proposed. It does not matter, and it will still manifest in other ways because the truth is self-evident, and the truth of these people's ideations and their disposition towards Black people is one of inherent racism and supposed dominance or attempted dominance. And it will always manifest through their actions and their intention. And you can tell people's intention by the fruits of their actions. Look at what people do, and you will be able to tell who and what they are. Always. Everything metaphysical has to correspond to something physical. Everything vibrationally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever the case may be, will always manifest in the physical. It has no choice but to. That is one of the laws of the universe. And so, even when no matter what law was passed, racism doesn't just go away because some legislature said, hey, y'all, we can't ensure that Black people don't go to school anymore. That's not how it works. That's never been how it works.
repercussions for Black people. Why? And so the system is supporting this personal point of view that you're talking about. And people are having longer sentences for the same crimes than white people. This not me making that up.
He kind of looks like, what's his name? He kind of looks like I'm Dante, low key, like a slimmer version.
For the same crimes than white people. This not me making that up. Like, that is actual data.
All right,
so
pause.
systemic is real.
Pause.
she's
You've been voted
cooking
out by
that.
the majority. Please return to your
Thank
seat.
you.
Thank you.
As far as
Never mind.
systematic racism, right? I think most of us would agree that at the very least it has occurred in this country.
Okay.
I think my argument would be that right now in modern America, I don't think, at the very least, it's not as prevalent as it has been to where it could stop us from being successful. If anything, really, I think institutions such as things with DEI.
What do you think DEI is?
Basically, I think that it's in a way it's racism against other races outside of blacks. And so
Where did you get that concept of it from?
I've researched a lot of things. Basically, my point is I think that as far as systematic racism, I think that there's evidence from the other side. I think that we should be merit-based. I think that should always be merit-based and jobs and the different things like that. Race should not be something that's considered.
I agree that race should not be considered, and yet it is. And this is what I mean. Post 1964, nothing enshrined in legislation was racist, and yet the racism still persists. Just because it's not encoded in legislation or policy doesn't mean that it doesn't occur. And so I do agree with a merit-based system, but they don't. White supremacy does not agree with the merit-based system, so we can't have one. So we created DEI to level the playing field, to put some sort of parameters in place to ensure that Black people and other groups of people who have been historically marginalized or discriminated against receive some sort of representation or compensation or acknowledgement and consideration, especially in professional industries and fields. So whenever people say that it should be merit-based, yeah, it should be ideally, but it's not, because the people in charge do not run a merit-based system. They run a racist system. DEI is designed to counter that. That is not racism. And DEI extends beyond just African Americans and giving them opportunities to get corporate jobs and to get education in colleges and stuff like that. It also it involves things like how we accommodate the disabled. How we accommodate women, giving them things like tampons in the bathrooms and stuff like that, giving people who are disabled ramps to go up up a hill or up some steps. You know, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. It actually helps more white people out than it does Black people when you really look at it.
That let's say that there are ways right now where systematic racism is still alive. Again, it's not holding us back to a point where we can still be successful. We've seen so many examples, today in modern times where there's no opportunities that I have that a white person or that a white person has that I don't have. I would say that I have every opportunity in this country to be successful, to do what I want to do, and to stand on business that every other race has. Absolutely. And
Do you have the
again,
same support?
I have excellent community support.
That's
Absolutely.
lucky for you.
Sure.
Where did you grow up in a lower income, middle income, high income community?
It was middle income.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, I think that even those who grow up in very needy situations, right, they may not have been dealt a great hand of cards.
But they
can still, I think it comes down to accountability.
So he agrees with merit, but then he acknowledges the fact that certain people are not granted the same opportunities as others, which inherently contradicts his position. So you want it to be a merit-based system, and you agree with the merit-based system, but then you acknowledge the fact that it's not a merit-based system. So this is why things like DEI are created and implemented to negate that sort of inequity. Does it do a good job? We can debate the efficacy all you want, but the fact of the matter is that is the manifest function of it and why it has been instilled. And I can attest this as an African American. I grew up in a very affluent Black community, right? Middle to high income area, okay? Still, systemic racism persists, even right down to the education. Everybody was Black. The teachers were Black. We're still in a very white system. Who makes the books? It's not us. Who writes the history? It's not us. Whose history are they telling? And who's telling the history? It's not us. We regurgitate it, but we don't actually tell it or write it. So, and then there's the thing, like a lot of teachers, you look at education, for instance, again, they're basically just glorified propagandists. They don't actually encourage you to think critically, encourage you to think within the confines of the system. Okay. So no amount of Black wealth really matter, because if you go around, a lot of that is debt. A lot of the people who take out mortgages are debt to pay for the $500,000 million homes. It looks good based off of appearance, but what does it actually do? What does it actually show? What does it actually represent? And what does it truly mean for us as African Americans? So again, divorce your lived experience from the objective reality or the broader social context, because you are an outlier and he might be an outlier. I am an outlier in that regard. Relative to the average African American in this country, I am an outlier 100%, but I cannot negate or neglect the systemic inequities that have persisted for centuries. Okay? And I don't need my sort of accomplishments as a result of the work and the comforts of my microcosm to validate who I am as an individual, whereas other people do. And they think that, again, it affirms them and is a testament to their superiority, supremacy, or capability, when it really just illustrates the efforts and the success that a community can have when it is left unbothered from overt racial violence. But everything that you have as a result, as a product of that system, is not a result of you. It is you literally just got lucky. So it's not an accountability issue. And it literally proves that it's a systemic thing, because even if you are amongst the most affluent black communities, that's like saying you're the world's tallest midget. What does that actually mean? It looks good, and it is an accomplishment 100%, but it doesn't mean that other people just have an accountability issue when you are literally a product of your environment and a privilege that other people do not have the luxury of having.
They can still, I think it comes down to accountability. You can still play your hand and play your cards strategically in a way where you can still be successful, you can still do your thing, and you can wind up on top. And there's nothing stopping them from doing that.
Would you say that low-income white people and low-income black people have the same ability to excel?
I would say they have the same ability to excel.
Okay, so I'm going to start countering from that point then. Sure. So ultimately, we know that our low-income communities are not given the same access to resources, that policing as it exists in the United States came from slave catching. So even the tradition of policing comes from protecting property, not protecting people.
Okay.
If a father in the early 1900s was incarcerated for 2 years, how do you think that would impede their family from being able to grow, right?
Sure.
Now you're affecting the ability for their children to have two parents in the home. You also now have a mother who's like incredibly stressed we also know that there is a continued effort in this nation to not have black people know the history of this nation.
So one thing I want to highlight is COVID, right? People talk about, oh, we were in the house for like a year or 2 years, right? And we were. The socioeconomic ramifications that COVID had on the average person, the average American, were felt. And this is just people just staying in the crib, okay? Yeah, they lose money, they lose opportunities there for sure, but they were at least in the crib. Imagine that times 20 in the prison industrial complex, where you can't even take a shit in privacy. Okay? We're constantly berated and abused by guards, where there's sexual violence and coercion and manipulation. Okay? We're institutionalized, right? You're deprived of contact from your family, friends. Think about the psychological ramifications that that'll have on you. Okay? When you're conditioned to adhere to gang politics, and you essentially circumvent, through neglect, your preconceived notions of the world for the prisonized interpretation of society. Now you have this en masse with African Americans, but especially African American males. And then getting into the gender dynamics that she mentioned, where the women then have to compensate for it, that creates a sort of gender imbalance, which ultimately has a spiritual and psychological imbalance. But there are certain things that the male structure provides that are no longer provided anymore, and the women have to compensate for it, but they can't. Right? And so that puts more pressure on them, and that leads to things like people saying, like, women becoming more masculine. You get into whether or not that's true or not, but the fact of the matter is that there is 100% an imbalance. That often leads to increases in criminality. And there were studies that have shown, this is an affront to women, it's just the truth, that when it comes to reducing criminality in children, the best option is to have a 2-parent household. After that, it's a single dad household, and that the discrepancy between single parent households with reducing criminality and single dad households with reducing criminality were pretty even, right? There's a discrepancy, but they're pretty much there. Once it came to a single mother household, the chances of criminality increased exponentially. Okay, so if you want to reduce criminality amongst children, it's mother, father, or just father. But when it's single mother, there's an issue, and that it drastically increases. Now, this isn't a blame women type of thing, because we literally just cited how it's a systemic cause, because there's an imbalance there. You can say whether or not women are capable or incapable. Women should not have to be capable of bearing that on their shoulders alone. That's the point. Women should not have to carry that. Black women should not have to carry that burden on their own. You get into personal decision, all that stuff. There are still systematic causes beneath all of that.
We look in Florida at the laws that they are passing to not allow education about our past. And we know that if we don't know where we came from, how can we know where we're going?
Sure, okay.
All right, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Whenever she starts cooking and teaching and educating, they kick the person out every single time, because they do not want to hear the truth. Like I said, hearing the truth to them is the same threat as perceiving physical danger.
Hi.
Here goes a try wife again.
We cool now?
We good. We good. I think we're on the same. We're kind of looking at the same side of the same coin, and I think we both want the betterment of the Black community, and I think we're maybe coming from it from different ways, and
people will say that, yet they actively work against it, or their opinions are against the continued investment and evolution of the Black community. You cannot say you want the betterment of the Black community, yet still adhere to white supremacist narratives.
I do respect your position to what you were saying as well, that there are certain things and powers at play. And I've experienced racism firsthand. A lot of conservatives may try to act like, oh, there's no racism in America. I absolutely believe that there's racism in America. I just don't think that the systems as they stand today are inherently racist, because I've seen too many.
And we have to start saying that we believe racism exists. It's a fact. You don't believe the sky is blue. It just is.
Black people overcome. And I just feel like a lot of times what's left out of the dialogue is self-accountability and like self-will. We talked about how we were 3/5 of a person, but now we are 100%, I guess, according to the law or whatever, a person. And I feel like at the end of the day, if you wanted to walk out here right now and decide, you know what, I want to change my career, I want to do that, you can. And that's why.
See, there's the emotional appeals. I feel like, but what is the truth?
So many people, and Nigerians come here, and Indians come here, and so many people who are not white, who are supposed to be discriminated against because they're not white, they come here and they become doctors and lawyers. Why? Because to your point, there's community. They're elders. They're not twerking and shaking booty. They're getting.
They are literally twerking and shaking booty in
the
Nigeria.
Nigerians I know ain't doing it. If they are
we
twerking and shaking, but they
learned
doctors
it from Africa.
They're doctors twerking and shaking
literally
booty. So
have
maybe
it
they
from
can
Africa.
shake because they got the money to back it up. But do you see what you're saying?
See, so she says they're not shaking ass about a lot and Blaine shaking ass on it. And then she cites how literally shaking ass came from West Africa. And then she's like, well, okay, maybe they are, but that's because they have the money. So money validates their ability to shake ass. Okay, whatever, right? I don't go to the clubs anymore, so I wouldn't know. I haven't seen ass shaking since forever. Having said that, right, every time their point gets countered, they had to just follow it with some other arbitrary nonsense that they can't validate in any regard. Shit, there go my mic. It's literally just claims and it's literally just claims and appeals. No truth there. If we blame the flaws and the failings of the Black community on shaking ass, we've lost the plot. And the majority of people shaking ass are like 18 to 25, 27-year-old young women. You know what I mean? Like, are we really going to blame the failings of Gen X and Boomers on 18-year-olds in college? Are we really going to blame that on freshmen at Spelman University? You know what I'm saying? Like just consider the audacity to say that. And she talks about lack of accountability. There is lack of accountability, and that's the testament to it. There is a lack of accountability in people with these harmful mentalities to address the broader issues at play. And so they try to simplify so that way, again, they can affirm their stances, but also neglect the broader truths that are uncomfortable to come to terms with, which is the fact that you don't have as much agency as you want. So you delude yourself into such, right? You come up with these concise narratives, that are cathartic and say, we actually do have more power than we do. We just have to do this and do that. And it's just not true. Like, if you just acknowledge the fact that your free will is extremely limited, it becomes much easier to navigate through life, because then you can actually garner a sense of free will. But you're not doing that. You're kind of just talking bullshit. That's what she's doing. You know? So she can never actually have free will or have some sort of accountability or dominion over her life, because she's never actually acknowledged the fact that she doesn't have it in the first place. So if you don't acknowledge that you don't have it, you can't have it. And it's open air prison. Anyway, let me go on with that. Again, you could tell. I think it's like this haughty sense of supremacy where they're like, hey, I dress like this. I dress really modest. I don't shake ass. Therefore, I'm better than you. If a girl wants to shake ass, let the bitch shake ass. Like, who cares? A girl shaking ass has nothing to do with socioeconomic inequity. It's not the cause of it. If you want to say it's an effect, whatever. It's not the cause of it. Like, that's not the reason why we're having issues in our community.
Do you see what I'm saying, though? We have to be honest, Amanda.
As a fellow daughter of an immigrant,
okay,
right? So my mother's from Grenada. My mother did come here and was able to work and was able to get green cards for folks. So shout out to my mom. There's a very big difference in growing up somewhere and coming from a place where you are the majority and where your people are running the show, than being somewhere where your people have been subjugated the entire time your people have been here.
But your mama came here and she wasn't the majority, so how did she succeed?
If we don't acknowledge divide and conquer in the United States, we are having a pointless conversation.
I agree.
We have to acknowledge that there is
That's the folly of black exceptionalism.
a concerted effort at divide and conquer in the United States. We're literally watching it happen right now with an effort to divide and conquer and have black people fighting immigrants.
And fighting white people.
White people is not the point. The concept of white people is about people who are upholding a supremacy of whiteness versus people who understand that there should be an egalitarianism. There should be an equality.
That we are becoming the new white supremacists.
We are.
We've been putting them on a pedestal.
We are.
We feel like
that we are joining them and instead weaponizing our blackness against our people. When we do what you're saying, we are saying.
How can you say we're becoming the new the new white supremacists, when one, white supremacy still exists, and two, the majority of the country is white, three, it's an inherently racist system, and four, nobody's colonizing Europe, they're always colonizing Africa.
I am better because I figured it out, and so you're the problem because you didn't figure it out.
But Amanda, what about if I believe that the American dream is, I have a right to that as well? Is that me joining white people, or is that me saying, you know what, I want a life for my dream? The American dream for me, because it may look different from other people. Some people it's a boss chick. For me, I want my kids to grow up in a wonderful neighborhood. I want them to go to college. I feel like a lot of times in the black community, we associate anything that's right or that's just or that's striving forward with whiteness. So when working with them,
it's whiteness, it's capitalism. And I think that's what we have to understand the difference of. The concept of capitalism always is grounded in exploitation.
But Amanda, we're sitting here benefiting from capitalism, and you know that because you would want to move to a
that we are benefiting. I understand that we are benefiting from capitalism, but I also understand that we would have other people and a majority of people benefit if we were not solely capitalist. That is what it means to be a black radical. It's to understand that I can benefit as well as others.
So Amanda, what is your solution then? Because
being capitalist, people say you benefit from capitalism. Damn right, I have two phones. This came from slave labor. The MacBook that I'm on right now came from slave labor. This came from slave labor. All of this comes from slave labor. The entire country is a product of slave labor. The entire Western sphere of influence is a product of slave labor. Yes, and capitalism is intrinsically tied to that. That does not mean that you cannot be anti-capitalist or that you cannot call out the flaws of capitalism. When you are literally born into that system, it would be impossible for me, or extremely hard for me to not give into or buy into the capitalist system without having like nothing at all. It would be impossible, actually. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had to go build a cabin I don't know how to do that. There's some people on YouTube, you see like the Indian guys, and they build like a resort out of sand in their hands and sticks. They're brilliant, right? I don't know how to do that, which gets into like the topic of ancient civilization. If two Indian guys on YouTube can do that, imagine what an entire culture can do. You get into like lost history and all that. Anyway, let me move on. So yes, we do benefit from the capitalism, but the capitalism is rooted in our exploitation of people that look like us, and its continued perpetuance. So anytime people say that, they were being historically and intellectually dishonest, because they're not talking about the context or the reason as to why we are engaging in capitalism. It's not a choice. It's like going to get a job. If the options are get a job and work 40 hours a week for your corporate overlords, or starve, you don't have a choice. When the prospect of death is considered, is a major implication. You don't have free will.
Benefits us, and people are coming here every day.
My solution is what I continue to say. We need to have coalition building across cultural differences, across ethnicities, across classes.
And that includes collaborating with white people.
I've never said it didn't.
But I feel
this obsession with white people fails to acknowledge the fact that there are people who benefit from white supremacy.
But we live in America,
Let me finish my point. There are people who benefit from white supremacy that do not identify themselves as white. They don't consider that to be the most important element of their identity, because we all deserve a right to exist, and I shouldn't have to earn my right to exist. And that is what capitalism does.
Existing isn't a right, and existing isn't a right. It just is. Like, people talk about, oh, you have the right to exist. You have the right to. What do you mean I have the right to? I'm here. What do you mean I have a right to? I'm here. It's not a right. You have to deal with me. I was born against my consent. I don't have a right to exist. I simply do.
You have to earn it. That's what I'm saying.
That is what this nation is. You do have to earn it.
You do.
Yes, you do. That is why we are criminalizing the poor. We are criminalizing the poor on a regular basis. How so? Because we're not even allowing for a wage to happen to allow people to get out of poverty. We are seeing inflation grow.
We both have people in our family that have done it, so we can't.
No, we have not had people that are done it. My mother came to America with an entire nursing degree.
Even if they do, that's still 2 people out of millions.
I can't say, oh, well, my mother did it, why can't you? Because my mother
was pregnant at 19 from the south side of Chicago with no degree and still made
good
something
for
of
your
herself.
mom. But this is the thing.
So we can't do it.
It's not. The question isn't whether or not some people can do it. The question and the reality is that it is not available to everyone in an equal way.
And that's unfortunate, man. But you know we live in a broken society. I went to Nigeria and they're having the same problems, and it's a bunch of black people that are running Nigeria.
It's a broken society.
But it's the same thing in Nigeria.
But Nigeria is a broken society, whereas Burkina Faso is not. Burkina Faso is not.
That's time.
My final claim is black conservatism.
And she shouted out Burkina. She mentioned Burkina Faso. Shout out to Ibrahim Traore. More people need to be like him. I hope he can. May he have a long and prosperous life. Ibrahim Traore. I don't want to disrespect his name, but yeah.
Fails to meet the needs of the working class.
So I think black conservatives, we're the ones who really want the best.
There we go. The genesis is the same as the terminus. The end is the same as the beginning. Abraxas. Here he goes. Here he goes. He was at the very beginning. Now he's there at the end.
Best for working people. I think we're the ones. Like a lot of the liberals, a lot of the leftists, they wanted to do things like office work. They wanted to go reparations, try to get things from the government and get handouts. We say, hey, go out there and work. Go out there and get these jobs that are available. Work with your hands. Do skilled trades. That's where a lot of us talk about skilled trades.
Slavery.
So working class, that's really a black conservative thing, in my humble opinion.
I think that would be true if black conservatism also created pathways for people to get those jobs and also to be able to challenge the corporations that are using their labor, that are stealing from them and not impeding them from having a union. So for instance, like in the South, right? I just left North Carolina where I met with the USSW, the Union of Southern Service Workers. This is an unofficial union of individuals who work at places like Waffle House, at Food Lion, etc. And their unofficial union is unofficial because the conservatives in that state will not allow for them to be officialized.
Legitimized.
Legitimized.
There you go. I got you.
They would be able to push back legitimately on the corporations to get fair wages, right? So
the concept of legitimization has always been sort of abstract to me, because it's like, what actually makes something legit? Like, does it have to be enshrined in legislation? Because racism is legit, and yet it's not enshrined in legislation anymore. I think there's a degree of dominance that you have to have, a degree of social pressure, socioeconomic pressure that you can exhibit only an opposing force is what gives you legitimacy. There have been theories about this. Literally, it's only about might. It's might makes right. And that's the unfortunate reality of this country. I'm not saying I agree with it personally, but the way that it works is that if you have the power to do something and to negate the efficacy and the ability or mobility of others, then you have the power. That's simply it. So it's not like they're illegitimate. They just simply don't have enough of a fighting force to advocate for them.
She was in Baltimore getting $15.25 as a minimum wage, and then when she moved Just one state away, she was now only getting $7.25 for minimum wage, but the cost of living was the same for her. So when we talk about, the effort of saying, but I think that the impediments by leveling up corporations and by pouring into the effort of corporations to keep billionaires, as Black conservatives, you are actually cutting off the ability for those people to excel.
Okay, I understand your point, but a lot of us are more about being self-sufficient. So the South, a friend of mine down there, King Randall, has a school for boys. He's 22 years old. He has a bunch of kids living with him. He's teaching them physical skills they can do.
His friend is 22.
Yeah.
Being a mechanic, working on things with your hands. So you don't got to worry about corporations. You could be your own man. You could be your own woman. And also, didn't you also say earlier that you're against unions? But are you for them now?
No, I never said that.
Oh, so you're for unions?
Absolutely.
So when the unions keep Black folks out, you're for that as well? Because that's traditionally...
Obviously, I am not for that. Unions have definitely in the beginning kept Black folks out. And the reason why they were keeping Black folks out is because after the Civil War, when there was Reconstruction, you had all these Black people that had been used with free labor and they had skills, right? Whether they were a blacksmith or a carpenter or whatever. However, they could not get jobs because the white people who now had to fend for themselves, if you will, because they didn't have slaves, they had to go and learn all these trades.
Right.
And so they actively kept Black people out of those jobs. And then what they would do is that when they would, as a union, say, we're going on strike, the Black people would be like, well, we'll work because they won't let us in their union anyway. And then when they would go and actually get those jobs that the people were on strike for, they would hang them. They would lynch them. So yes, these are real things. Acknowledge the past when it's convenient, and then we only stay in the present when it's convenient. So you can't simultaneously say, well, everybody's fine now and there's no systemic racism at the same time as stating that there are unions that are racist and unions that aren't racist. Ultimately, there is racism in the United States. It is deeply embedded. And Black conservatives are working against the working class because they are actively placing their vision, their ideology of Black excellence in economics solely.
Well, there is racism
and in individual economics. And I think that's really the big difference of what we're talking about right now. You're talking about every man for themselves. Every man for themselves.
No. I don't think be individual as people, as Black people, but still get all of us on the same page. My friend's at school, he's not just looking out for himself, he's looking for all these kids as well, rather than relying upon the corporations and white people to lift this up.
There's a difference between relying on and acknowledging that there are impediments of. And I want to acknowledge the reality that we keep seeming to bump up against, which is that everybody has equal ability, and they don't. And as far as I'm concerned, Black conservatives do not address the needs of the working class, which are fair access to resources, which are equal access to getting jobs, which are equal pay to this, and we don't.
Equal to who?
Equal to other states even. Like there's no reality where you can say that the same amount of white people are working low wage jobs per capita as Black people. There's such a disparate incarceration of Black people that it impedes their ability to get higher level education as well as higher level employment because we know about disenfranchisement.
Yeah, she cooked him. And here's the other thing. They talk about, conservatives, working class, and they try to project themselves like this bastion of morality. She's pregnant. Shorty is pregnant, mind you. Not a single person has allowed her to speak. And she's having a hard time moving. Look at how late into the pregnancy that she is. I do kind of want to hear what she has to say. I hope that she does come up. But and more to that conservatism, the biggest issue facing the working class and Black community is that lack of unionization and galvanization. Individual efficacy isn't going to solve systemic issues. You need collectivism. You need communalization. If you don't have that, if you don't have a broad community to counter an unjust system, no individual effort will matter.
I would actually argue that the Black working class is failing themselves. Wouldn't you agree that, in order to get a job, in order to qualify for a certain position and an education system at a job, wouldn't you argue that it should be based off of qualifications and not your race or identity?
I've never argued that. I've never argued that.
So you're saying that there should be Black Americans in education systems, in jobs, but wouldn't you argue that they should be qualified for those positions and not just placed there because of their skin color?
I've never disapproved that.
Okay,
That's not what DEI is.
Okay.
Do you know that?
Well, I'm not talking about DEI right now.
You're suggesting that I suggested that somebody should get a job just because they're Black. And I've never asserted anything like that.
I understand that you may not say that exactly, but a lot of the claims are, they're pointing to that.
No, it's not pointing to that.
Okay.
And so that is that. I need to clear this up.
They
We
just
live
lie.
in a nation that has
Conservatives just lie.
pedestaled white people. Back to your point, DEI is about expanding.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Not lowering credibility.
Okay.
So if we have a system that has very actively said these particular people are the best people simply because of their race, DEI said, or their gender.
Okay.
Hold up. People say, okay, DEI, blah, blah, blah. Trump administration. Who's in charge of the Department of Education? Who is it? The wife of the former president of WWE? Linda, I forgot her name. She has no qualifications to do such. Pete Hegseth was an alcoholic, and he's in charge of, what is it, Department of Defense? They're both white. All right. You take two underqualified. I mean, the entire. What is this? The other guy? He's like a 22-year-old. He was a grocery store employee. And now he's in charge of like counterterrorism for the FBI. All of these people are underqualified white people. I'm not saying that a 22-year-old who worked at a grocery store shouldn't ascend to the next level. I'm not saying that at all. As someone who's in their early 20s, I can understand the importance of such. What I am saying is that, mind you, he doesn't have the degree. I don't think he has a qualification or degrees necessary to even put him in that position. I don't think he even has like a degree in criminal justice, for instance. How can you put him into? He literally got there by being a sycophant for Trump. Not because of his merit or his ability to excel. All of them are just basically yes men. They don't actually have any qualifications. They just meet his needs. That doesn't mean that they're qualified for the position. They can kiss ass, but what can they actually do?
DEI mostly leveled up white women.
Okay.
I mean, you can't tell me that there wasn't a black guy that was more qualified than Pete Hegseth, who's, again, a drunkard. I'm saying that as someone who's literally drinking Chardonnay right now.
So it would be incorrect if it's, if we're pointing toward this, a majority of race is qualified because of the base of their skin color.
Absolutely, yeah. Whether they're white, black.
Okay,
I mean, race is fake anyway.
Now, I do want to touch on a point that you did mention earlier, that you would argue that, black people have less opportunities in America. I do not agree with that. I have not had
first of all, you're a light-skinned woman,
and so are you.
Yes,
and you're doing great for yourself.
Yes, and so colorism really does serve us.
I do want to say, why do you think that is though? Why do you think that? Do you think it's just based off the color of our skin, or do you think it's based off of the reputation that black people make for themselves?
What reputation are black people making for black people?
Let's look at music, for example.
We already had this conversation with somebody else.
Well, we're going to have it again. Most of the people that...
Oh, are we?
Most of the people...
I'm going to shut it down right now and let you know that the reality is that when you come to black music, for you to say most of the people, you've already lost the argument.
Am I right?
There is no most of the people with black people because you haven't heard of all of black music.
Most of the music that is, let's say, maybe exalted or are shown by the media, right?
And who controls those systems?
It defiles...
Who controls the media narrative and the representation? It's not us. Who controls? They will never answer that.
Black Americans.
Controls those
but who's putting it out there? We are. Black.
No,
we're the ones
actually,
putting it
the
out there.
distribution systems that are putting them out there are owned by white people.
Who listens to them? Because I can bet you, most of my friends, my black friends that are not conservative, they listen to that music that defiles their bodies.
You know who else?
I know what I can say this. I listen to a lot of King Von. I listen to a lot of King Von. I listen to a lot of Chief Keef. I listen to a lot of the early Migos and all that stuff. I listen to a lot of music that talks about crime. I definitely do. That literally has no impact on me whatsoever. I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact on other people. I listen to Simba a lot, right? I'm not saying that it doesn't have an impact on the black community at all. But what I'm saying is that is not the underlying cause or the issue. That is just a symptom. And it does have a detrimental impact, but I have had the insulation of my community and my personal knowledge to intelligence and all that to protect me from whatever negative influences that may have. And I won't deny that, and that listening to NBA YoungBoy 1,000 times on repeat is 100% a mental illness, right? Even though YoungBoy is pretty good, but if YoungBoy is your favorite artist, we gotta have a conversation, okay? Or maybe we shouldn't have a conversation. That does not contribute. That is not the root cause of the degradation of the black community. Listening to King Von and 21 Savage and YoungBoy and what's his name, Baby Chief, listen to music about that stuff literally does not matter. Like that's not an issue. That's a distraction. And they'll always cite that. And the people who cite this are often people who listen to other forms of music and they use it as a form of supremacy. Like, hey, I don't listen to rap. I'm not like other black people. And especially when they try to appeal to their black friends. I mean, to their non-black friends. Like, hey, I'm not like these other black people. You know, I listen to, what's his name? Wallen? What's the dude's name? I listen to Morgan Wallen and Nirvana, so I'm not like other black people. And blah, 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 blah. My sister in Christ. Oh, she not my kinfolk. She my skinfolk, but she not my kinfolk. My sister in Christ. That does not make you better. You know, just because you don't want to listen to Lil Durk does not mean that you're better. Because clearly you're lacking in the intelligence category. You know, it doesn't absolve your personal flaws of who you choose to listen to, because none of that matters. It plays an impact, but it's not the determining factor.
It's about black on black crime and everybody else. But if we don't know, I can bet you most of my friends, my black friends that are not conservative, they listen to that music that defiles their bodies.
You know
that
who
talks
else
about black on black crime and every.
See, and then she's like, most of my black friends who are not, so she tethers herself to that conservative label to give her a sense of belonging. She doesn't have one herself. This is a human issue, especially an American issue. You are not whatever you label yourself as. You are not a political ideology. I did Amanda Seales so dirty with this little frame right here. But you're not I did both of them so dirty. Look at their faces. I'm gonna use that shit as a thumbnail. You are not whatever label you ascribe yourself to. So it doesn't give you any sort of supremacy or validation. It literally it doesn't matter. It's arbitrary.
Everybody else. But if we don't acknowledge that they are not in the same way pursuing white voices talking about the same thing, even though they are. We simply like to start at the branches of a tree and not at the root. We have to understand that the media is king. Okay, media is king,
and media does not favor conservatism. I can tell you that right now. I mean, look at the protests right now in Los Angeles.
Depending on who is in office, media does favor them. Media
we have Trump in office right now, and media is not favoring Trump at all.
Media is absolutely not favoring Trump in certain spaces because Trump is also not favoring that particular type of media. But it depends on the day, and we have to acknowledge that regardless of whether you talk conservatism or not, media has never favored black people at any point.
All right, guys, that's time. You've been voted out.
So let's talk about facts. I just want to move back to systemic racism because you mentioned systemic racism earlier. I just want to look at 3 applications of systemic racism against white people and against East Asians as well. So for example, we have the National College Attainment Network, which defines affirmative action or even race-conscious admissions as taking race as one of the factors in whether or not you're going to admit a student. And we noticed that when race-conscious admissions was out of it, black enrollment dropped 64%. At UC Berkeley. And that is an act of systemic racism. Trying to look at people's races and allow them into colleges whether or not they're of a set race is racism. And it's race conscious. And Martin Luther King's most famous quote is that he doesn't want his children to be judged based on race, but by the content of their character. And the content of people's characters also includes merit.
They talk about that being his most famous quote, but who decided that was his most famous quote? Who perpetuated that into the ether? Who continuously repeated that quote? Who controls the media in the history?
I have another example of systemic racism. Burgess Owens, he's a representative out of Utah. He's a black Republican representative. He called out the MIT president for having black-only dormitories. I mean, what does that mean? Why are we trying to segregate each other and say that black people feel safer amongst black people when the truth is they are actually more in danger when they're around black people? And that's unfortunate. It's sad that I'm saying this, but it's the case, and I have to say it because it's true, okay? Black people are killing each other at a vast, crazy rate. Black men rapping about it. It's savagery. It's barbaric, and we shouldn't be doing it as a people. We should try to get more Ben Carsons. Ben Carson's cousins were murdered when he was younger, but his mother came to him and gave him a book and told Ben Carson to read and study to not be like his cousins. And Ben Carson separated 2 twins at the back of the head, and he's known as one of the best pronounced neurologists or neuroscientists that we've ever seen, right?
Ben Carson said that slaves were immigrants.
Well, they were brought here to the United States, and many of them were slaves, and we know that to be a fact.
What is the difference between...
Ben Carson says slaves were immigrants, He says, well, we know that they were brought here, and many of them were slaves. This sounds like something that Trump would say. Yes, many slaves were brought here, and many of the slaves were slaves. Immigration is synonymous with the option of choice. You choose to immigrate to a country, right? Or you have some sort of agency over whether or not you can. Some sort of free will, or you're not coerced to a degree. Okay. He keeps going back to the Ben Carson thing. whatever. Shit, what was it he said?
That's
he
crazy.
talked about like the segregation of the dorms. Again, going back to Dr. King, he cited Dr. King quote, but he never talks about how Dr. King says that he feared he integrated his people into a burning house. So he started to regret his actions to a degree. Maybe that's why they want segregated dorms. Segregation has actually done a lot of damage to the black community. We want separate. A lot of people want it separate but equal, not separate and still living within their systems, not living within their dispensation. Because at that point, you sacrifice your own personal ability and agency to live within the confines of white supremacy, not just systematically, but also in your everyday life, personally as well.
Right? Black men rapping about it. It's savagery. It's barbaric.
And then they talk about black men rapping about crime. What about like the countless white people who also rap about crime and violence and country music and rock music? Genres which they didn't invent, by the way. They did not invent those genres.
We shouldn't be doing it as a people. We should try to get more Ben Carson's. Ben Carson's cousins were, I understand that many people were stolen here, but 90% of historians agree that slavery would have not been possible if black slave owners within Africa didn't sell off their people. White people didn't show up.
90% of historians do not believe that. You would have to define and constantly what a historian is, and then get every single historian's opinion on it. And then more to that, whenever people say, "Oh, blacks enslaved," do you know how big and how diverse of a continent Africa is? You got people in Angola, people in Burkina Faso, people in Nigeria, or what are now those countries, right? You have various ethnic groups, many of whom did not see each other as one and the same. Some did, many did. Like the people of Kush and the Egyptians were basically one and the same. The people of Kush are the modern Sudanese right now, black Africans. So the people of Kemet and the people of Kush were one and the same. The Africans, they saw each other as very similar people. You have other people, other cultures that didn't. There was a lot of division, a lot of conflict. There's always been interracial or intercontinental conflict, especially in Europe. Like I'm in my aforementioned point, the Europeans were always killing each other, always. Right? Africans are no different in that regard. The Chinese were killing each other by the millions, tens of millions, dozens of millions. That's not like a racial. That's not like a racialized point. That's just human nature. So then to try to manipulate it as such to suit your agenda is just it's historically and academically dishonest. So you have these various kingdoms and tribes and cultures that didn't see each other as the same. They're not saying, "Oh, we're all African." They're like, "I got beef with this tribe. I got beef with this kingdom." You defeat their people, you sell them as prisoners of war. It was this one guy, I forgot what he was the king of. I'll probably put it up in the video. He was the king of this nation, and he, for alleged like one of the European powers that had conquered, that had enslaved his people, that as prisoners, they enslaved his prisoners. He thought, oh, they would be coming home soon. They said, oh, nah, homie, this is forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, he thought, oh, it was temporary, because that's how it was in Africa. The system of slavery wasn't temporary. It wasn't permanent. It wasn't racialized. This is the first and only system in the world in which you can tell who is the descendant of a slave based off of the color of their skin. That's never happened before. They did not understand the true extent of European slavery because it was far more brutal and protracted compared to slavery on the African continent. So they didn't even see each other as the same people. They saw each other as different groups of people. So you can't group them into the same category because they genetically, biologically, and culturally were not one and the same. Was there overlap? Yeah, but they were not. The same thing with Native Americans. That's why the Europeans were able to beat them. People thought, oh, they defeated the Native Americans. Mind you, it took multiple European empires, like about 7 European empires, centuries, attacking from literally every single direction and destabilizing and pitting Native American kingdoms and tribes against each other in order for them to get into the interior of the United States, of the continental United States. So it's not, oh, they were hurting each other. There's always going to be conflict.
And to start stealing people. They didn't do that. That's not how that worked.
They literally did that.
But they didn't. They worked with black owners and the Arabs.
They literally did that.
It's funny,
and Arabs did that as well. And I think it's very important. And I think it's important to note that there is an oversimplification of history as well as of Black people in Africa. There's a failure to acknowledge that in Africa, Black people did not consider themselves Black people. That was a racial distinction that was solely created by white oppressors to legitimize slavery.
Arab oppressors, actually, because the Arabs did it in the 7th century. They were the first ones.
They did not name it under Blackness. They simply just decided we're going to go and have enslavers. This was a decision that was actualized and then tried to be pushed forward through eugenics. There was an executive order that was passed a few months ago that said that Donald Trump wants to now control the museums because he wants to take back control of the narrative around race.
I also add on this point, it's probably going to be the last time before I shut my bitch ass up for good because we got like 16 more minutes left in this video. The way racism works is this. Look at an Eastern Russian and a Mongolian, you can't tell them apart. Now look at a Mongolian and a Chinese person, you cannot tell them apart. And look at a Chinese person and a Japanese person, you can't tell them apart. Why? Because you're not part of the in-group. You're not in proximity to East Asia. You do not live in East Asia. You cannot tell the difference, but they can. The Japanese can tell the difference between the Koreans. The Koreans can tell the difference between the Japanese and the Chinese. The Chinese can tell who's a Mongolian and who's an East Russian. You cannot because you're not part of that in-group. So when the European colonizers came, what did they see? They just saw black. They didn't say, "Oh yeah, he's Swahili, he's Ethiopian, he's Niger." Even though again, a lot of those countries didn't exist back then, but they didn't know. They did know, but they didn't care. All they saw was black. They didn't look at the racial and cultural differences, and this is why they drew arbitrary national borders, oftentimes encompassing different ethnic groups that had conflict with one another, in order to further destabilize these countries so they can continue to exploit them to no end. So it wasn't, it was a very intricate and a very precise system of feigning ignorance to destabilize and pit people who already had conflicts against each other and exacerbate these conflicts. You know, it was very deliberate in their efforts. So people don't talk about that. And even if you ascribe this like a more local level, if you live in the inner city of New York, you can tell, okay, he's from Harlem, he's from Brooklyn, when you're from outside, you cannot tell. Unless you know people from there, you cannot tell. I cannot tell who's from Harlem. I can, but that's me. Most people cannot tell. Oh, he's from Harlem, he's from the area. You go to Seattle, you cannot tell who's from this part of Seattle, who's from that part. But people who were within that in-group can. It's classic in-group, out-group. It's classic in-group, out-group psychology. When you're not part of that in-group, everybody looks the same to you. When you're in the out-group, everybody within that specific in-group looks the same. Or they appear the same. Or they have some similarities. When you're in the in-group, you can discern the discrepancies. Now, that's human nature. When you take it to the extreme and then start discriminating against people and then ascribing labels accordingly, even though they have nothing in common with each other, or they have very little in common with each other, or they don't relate to each other, that is when the racism spurs about.
These museums that they cited was that there was a display that speaks about race not as a biological thing, but as something that has just been created as a social construct. And he stated that that is an incorrect expression of race, that race is biological.
But it is biological. Like, let's look at our phenotypical traits, the nose differences, the hair texture. It's a biological thing.
Oh,
sure,
you're very convicted in your lack of information around these things. Race and ethnicity are two different things, okay? Ethnicity is where you're from. Race is literally something that was created to put people into categories of caste, to put people into categories of oppression. Race is not something that you are. Race is something that was bestowed and put upon you.
That's racism, not race. Race is simply the aggregation.
Race is literally something that was created and put upon you. And I want you to listen to me as somebody who has studied this, who has a master's in African American Studies from the Institute for Research in African American Studies at Columbia University. I want you to understand very clearly that race is not something that is biological. There is literally
look at us.
Look
at the differences.
There is many differences that are equated to ours that has nothing to do with race.
Melanin content is not bad.
Whenever people say this, they'll be like, "Oh, look at the hair. My mom is black. She's as dark as me. She has naturally straight hair." And people think that she's Indian. She's not. She's African American. Some people think she's Native American. She's not. You know. She's darker than him. You know, is she less black? No. He has curlier hair than she does. Is he more black? No. He looks goofy as shit right here. It reminds me of that Ken Carson picture. But anyway.
biological at
so
all?
if you have a black parent and you have a white parent, and now you come out looking white, how is that a biological proof of your race?
Most of them
There's
come
no
out
most of them.
having
Stop,
curly
stop,
hair.
Stop. There's no most of them. You do not
Mixed
have
race?
anything to
You're
prove
mixed
that.
race too.
I am not mixed race. My mother is black and my father is black.
Well, my father is also considered black, but he's very much has a lot of European DNA. And
You know what I think? I think that you are at a phase of your learning where you are a contrarian. And I look forward to seeing your development, because I have a feeling that you're actually going to flip the script eventually, because you are somebody that definitely is grounded in wanting to learn facts and wanting to learn the truths of things. However, you're currently still stuck in an indoctrinated space that is tricking you into thinking that you are something that you are not. Ultimately, you are of an ethnicity that has thrived in spite of it. And that is where we really exist from. And that is where our resilience comes from.
I think our resilience is happening now. I think growing, understanding the real problems.
Until he overcomes his psychosis, his mentality and people like him actively work against our continued progression. He is just an Uncle Ruckus. He wants to appeal to whiteness so bad. And you can see it. You know, and it's a damn shame, the mental illness. But that's his reality, and he can't be saved because he doesn't want to do better. He literally does not want to do better. He's young. Some people are like, okay, give it time. You know, you can say, oh, maybe he's not completely crystallized in his ideations just yet. Maybe there's still some fluidity, but he looks like he's like early 20s or something like that. Maybe teenager, maybe late teens. I highly doubt that he will come to the truth. Not because of a personal vendetta or bias against him, but because of the likelihood of it being slim, the current trajectory of this country, intellectually speaking, and then intrinsic human instincts and motivations. He does not want to do better. So there's no motivation for him to do such. It would take something extremely traumatic. And it only takes a subconscious mind to be traumatized once for people to get it. And I feel like he's endured the trauma so much that it becomes ubiquitous and pervasive to the point where he cannot distinguish his trauma from the truth. And because of that, he will always remain in his mentality and he can never do better. I hope I'm wrong. And she said this earlier in the video. She hopes she doesn't like being right. She hopes that she's wrong. I hope I'm wrong too about this. But
not going out and trying to protest against, you guys don't ever do this. KTS.
You
Dre,
guys don't ever do that.
KTS
Who is
Dre,
you guys?
Members of the black community that want to hold people accountable, especially black people. So KTS Dre was shot 60 times outside of Cook County, Chicago. How many BLM members came out? BLM
Stop
is about
referring
police.
to me as you guys.
Okay, that's fine. So, for example, we had a really good example of this where it's not a police, because I remember you said...
Where are you from?
Where am I from? What do you mean by that? Like, what state am I from? Where was I born?
Where do you live right now?
I live in Florida. I was born in Angola, though. I was born in...
Where did you grow up for most of your time?
In Maine. I lived in North America.
In Maine?
Yes.
And what is the population of black people in the town that you're from?
It's really extremely low, but I grew up around black people, and there's a black community where I lived.
And that black community that you lived in, did they teach you about black history in the United States?
I
Like,
learned black history.
Are your parents black American?
Yeah, my mom is black. My father is black.
No, I'm asking, were they born in the United States?
No, because I wasn't born there.
You guys are all from Angola.
Yes. But again, like I told you earlier, right? In terms of people like KTS Dre that were shot, BLM doesn't come out for them. And I remember you earlier said,
think it's really
hold on,
important.
Can I please finish? You earlier said that BLM is worried about police, but when Daniel Penny choked out the man that we all know was causing violence on that subway
He was not causing violence.
He was threatening
causing
people.
disruption is not causing violence.
He was there, and the people there helped him also. And we know that he helped them.
I don't know what that has to do with BLM. Random people on a train is not Black Lives Matter.
BLM showed up for that. They did.
Showed up for what?
BLM showed up threatening white people, saying
BLM protested.
BLM New York.
BLM protested. Where did you get that from? You see, your sources are not. You're not able to cite your sources. Please go sit down.
Yeah, that's the truth.
It's not
as a discredit, but whenever people say, okay, cite your sources on these types of shows, right? It's hard to do so because like you're engaged in an open debate. It's like, do you expect the person to just whip out the phone and be like, I got everything that I've ever thought about in my life right here? Or like most of my sources come from my dreams. You know what I mean? Like, and no one's gonna tell me that I'm wrong. I'm not saying that you shouldn't fact check, but if you're wise enough and you're intelligent enough to just perceive everything that's in front of you and to feel the vibes of the situation, you don't need the data to tell you what it is. So he's lacking in that regard. Sources are for midwits. Sources are for people who cannot think for themselves. Can they validate your perspective if you are more higher intelligence, of course, 100%. But if you need the data to think for you, you're probably lacking. You probably shouldn't debate in the first place. You can't think critically. And this isn't an affront to any of them in particular. I'm just saying that the data is an enhancer. It doesn't validate the truth every single time. And I think it's largely rooted in like this Western Eurocentric perspective where if it hasn't been written down and documented, then it never occurred. And if you look at like a lot of global Southeastern and non-European traditions, their history is recorded orally, so that way nothing is codified or diluted. So as you hear it is as it is, and that's it. And it's harder to misconstrue, contrary to popular belief. It also preserves the sanctity of it, so it's not inscribed in something materially. It's something that is preserved by the essence of the soul and the spirit and the psyche. So just because something is not written down or materialized or put into some sort of tangible metric doesn't mean that it is not true. Now, I'm someone who carries their sources around, not all the time, but I do have a lot of sources on me. But I keep that just as a backup plan. Usually when someone asks me to prove it, I'm like, just look.
Nothing you say is actually the truth. Nothing. You're not even American. You're not even a Black American. As the daughter of an immigrant, it is imperative that Black people from other places understand the disparate difference that they exist from Black people in the United States. It is not the same. Period. And ultimately, the best effort that we can do as a diaspora is to lead in understanding, not in judgment. So when I am talking to somebody from Sudan, from the Congo, from Angola, I am listening to understand their experience, not to undermine it. And I refuse to allow anybody from Grenada, from Angola, from any other place to come and try to undermine the experience of Black Americans.
Pick the pregnant show.
Who feels passionately about something that they want to talk to me about?
My claim is that Black people as a community need to walk away from the Democratic Party and progressivism completely. I'm saying
I don't disagree with that.
This from a very unique perspective. I'm not trying to shout myself or anything. This is really just my experience. Currently, I'm running for Congress, right? And one of the biggest hurdles I have in doing that is the Black community. It's because they expect us to be in this box.
What's the box?
The box would be, okay, you're Black, so you got to be a Democrat. Let's take immigration. That's a hot button issue right now, especially in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
My view is that you should come here the legal way, and that if you don't come...
Did the European colonizers come here the legal way? Did they ask for permission or a visa? And if so, we're the Native Americans.
And the reason why I say specifically in my claim that Black people need to walk away from the Democratic Party is because every single election cycle, all they do is use us as their tokens. They use us as their kind of election tools. They use us as these campaign posters. They tell us to come to their rallies. They tell us to sing on their stages. They tell us to do all these things, and they forget about us 3 other years, and they remember us 4 years later.
See, that's true. That's very true. But the solution isn't conservatism. It's like being in Star Wars and you criticize the dogma of the Jedi, yet you become a Sith. The Sith are not the answer. They're just words. Like, you just chose a worse option. So it's like the Democrats are a problem, 100%. They're not trustworthy. So your solution is to be conservative, a Republican.
What I don't like more than anything, is being used. It's being used by politicians, being used by governments as some type of puppet to say, here's my Black person, that's whatever. Yes, yeah, sorry.
I completely agree.
Trump is famous for saying, look at my African American right here.
Because the flip isn't a 180. Okay? If the flip is literally just, we was this and now we this. And that is not the same as we are for Black people. The Democratic Party is not for Black people, nor is the Republican Party.
The Democratic Party has never been for Black people. 1999 crime bill passed by Joe Biden. horrible and contribute to mass incarceration.
So it's imperative that we begin to truly understand the systems at work in this government that not only hinder us as Black people, but they hinder anyone who wants to see change because they are ultimately working together. Now, do we see one part? But at the end of the day, I will completely agree with you. Black people need to let the Democrats go. I think Black people need to let both of these parties go.
Kind of seeing this dynamic, that this is really what happens. A lot of times when we look at discourse, we look at it online, so everybody's typing and typing, but this is what real discourse looks like. When you have to really sit in front of someone and unpack your arguments, you can see the pressure that that causes and how you have to really kind of have your thoughts together and how heated and emotional it can get. So I think the fact...
All right, I'm not trying to hear what she has to say. The only motherfuckers that allow emotion to impede their judgment were the people on the conservatives. I'm not saying that Amanda didn't get emotional. She definitely did, 100%. It's an emotional topic. But did it negate her points? Did it compromise her perspective and her judgment? No, not at all. And so to that, I say this. Let me make sure I'm in to that, I say this. And I've already pretty much said everything I felt, everything I wanted to say on this topic. The psychosis was 100% there within the conservative base. I would like to see her go against people. I don't want to say like other more well-versed conservatives. I think that's an oxymoron. I don't think there are any conservatives that are well-versed in any particular topic other than narratives, racism, and self-affirming beliefs. And I like her position as not being partisan at all. We do not need Black people should not be sucking the Democratic Party. You know, like it's Republic. The Democratic Party is basically just Republican light. It's like the N-word but with a rainbow and an emoji at the end of it. It doesn't. It's not our saving grace. And there's too much of an emphasis. The entire rhetoric of the conservative base revolves on the effect and not the cause. And metaphysically, that's damning because you cannot solve an effect. You cannot solve an effect with an effect. You have to solve an effect by addressing the cause, and they seem extremely unwilling to do such for the perpetuation of these narratives. So when they were presented with objective truth and facts, like the guy in the yellow, I forgot his name, literally just said, "I don't believe that redlining exists. It's documented, bro. It happened." You know what I mean? So people who will willfully ignore the truth, that's not ignorance, that's stupidity. There's a degree of malice to it. Because you know better, but you still choose to do worse. They're malicious. People like that are malicious, and you can only hope the best for them, but I don't think that they will try to do the best, so I'm done here.